It begins. The days of finding a cheap used Toyota are coming to an end. They've certainly had their share of growing pains. With the increase in technology, the increase in costs leaves a lot of people orphaned from the market. When we started shopping for our brand new 2022 back a few short years ago, we realized that prices were starting to climb, even on higher mileage, clapped out units that were broken and bent. But things are changing and prices continue to rise. There's a multitude of reasons why you will no longer be able to find a cheap used Toyota. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
Car brands like Toyota tend to hold extremely well in their value, and they defy all logic when it comes to depreciation. Therefore, prices stay very high, even for older units with higher mileage. And a lot of cars like the Toyota Camry like this are very hard to come by with low mileage that haven't had an accident. Before we bought this, we were shopping for used cars. We really didn't want to spend money on a brand new car. We realize and appreciate what most people do, and that's you lose 20% of the value as soon as you scoot off the lot. And then of course followed up suit by losing another 20 to 30% in the next 5 years. But Toyotas for some reason change, and in our pursuit of looking for a used Toyota, we wanted a Camry or a Corolla, but unfortunately what we were finding was the only cars on the market that we were able to find had higher mileage. They all had an accident history associated with them, maybe a Carfax that said they had $8,000 damage or $4,000 damage, or again, maybe had 70, 80, 100,000 miles on them. Even though they're still quality cars and you can trust Toyotas to get you down the road and do it reliably and cheaply for many years to come, the unfortunate part is finding a good deal just simply didn't exist when we were shopping for our used Toyota. The simple fact is supply and demand rule the roost when it comes to a capitalist market. And of course, if you have a low inventory and a high demand, that's going to drive prices up. And what's causing all this demand for used Toyotas? Why was it so expensive to get a used Toyota, and the ones that you did find were generally worn out? That's because you no longer had the cream of the crop, because anything good was quickly snatched up and we couldn't get our hands on it quick enough. If you weren't there with your finger on the trigger ready to buy that and snatch up that Camry that hit the market, you probably got stuck just shopping for leftovers, all the scrap, all the junky cars with higher mileage and damage. There's a few reasons why used Toyotas are going up in value, or at least holding extremely strong, forcing you to pay top dollar. It starts with the chip shortage, and we know back in 2020, 21, Toyota shut down plants, you couldn't get chips, and a lot of their products just were not available. You had to wait for months. A lot of times the hybrid vehicles, you had to wait for almost years. There was vehicles like the Prius Prime and even the Tundra initially, when it came out, was redesigned with the new engine and hybrid. Quite often you'd have to wait a year, year and a half, 2 years or more to get your brand new Toyota. So that pushed a lot of people in the secondary market, and most people are generally loyalists. They know what they get with a Toyota, so they want to keep repeating the business. They know that it's been a generally reliable brand and a solid dependability with relatively low maintenance and running costs. It means that most people who were driving a Toyota 5 years ago are probably coming back to something similar. But because Toyota also realized that they could make a little bit more profit by the fact that if they didn't have inventory on the lot, they could likely charge maximum dollar or at least full MSRP, and in some cases price adjustments, because high demand vehicles like plug-in hybrids were highly sought after, like the RAV4 Prime, meant that they could charge a top dollar and customers were likely going to pay it. So ultimately people were willing to buy whatever they could, and what they couldn't get their hands on, they started to go into the secondary or the used market. And then naturally that drove prices up, because they are generally loyalists of the brand, and they weren't just going to say, well, I wanted a Toyota, but I'm gonna go buy a Ford instead. That just didn't happen. That's a pipe dream for Ford, but honestly, Toyota buyers and loyalists generally stick with the brand. But there's another major reason why it's hard to find the used Toyotas for a reasonable price, and that's because their overall reliability. People trust them. You get into a Camry, whether you have this 2.5 liter 4-cylinder or you get the older V6, and even the newest hybrid still uses a version of this 2.5 liter 4, but now it's made it up to their ECVT and of course the hybrid drive, which means it's very reliable, tested, and true. And that engine's been around a long time. They trust vehicles like that much more than vehicles like this. Now you get into a used luxury car like a Mercedes, Porsche, or any other kind of vehicle like this that tends to be more flash, a little less dash. Most buyers tend to know that it's a much bigger risk to buy something like this on the used market once the warranty's gone. But a Toyota, you don't worry as much about warranty. Whether there's an additional warranty, an extended warranty, doesn't really matter. Most buyers of Toyotas know that they can trust it. And even if something does break, it's generally a relatively cheap repair. Because on many modern luxury cars, they're generally higher performance. So a lot of people also realize that when it's time to do brakes, it might cost you $2,500, $3,000 to do a brake job on a Mercedes-Benz. On a Toyota, it might be substantially less. To do a full set of discs all the way around and the pads and to bleed the system, you're probably going to get in and out the dealership for $1,500. You're going to save thousands of dollars on brakes. You're going to save money on the tires. The tires are generally a little bit smaller. You're going to save money there. You're also going to save a lot of money on maintenance because smaller engines. A lot of these cars do not have turbos, and of course a lot of these luxury cars do have turbochargers. More heat, of course more frequent oil services just to keep them healthy means that it's going to likely cost you more money overall in the long run. Now, I've also talked about a recent repair in a Mercedes-Benz. A PCV like this is a $3,000 job, but to do a PCV job on a car like this, a Toyota, is likely going to be more like $500 done at the dealer all in. So reliability's top for a Toyota. Cost of replacement parts is top for Toyota. Maintenance, repairs always makes it very agreeable, so people want these used Toyotas. Again, hence driving up the demand for these cars. And even the interiors of Toyotas, they're quite well outfitted as well. These days, even a 5-year-old Toyota has a lot of the luxury amenities. This is a 2022, and it has all of the features from sunroofs to heated seats, heated steering wheel. You have the infotainment, you got the full-size screen on this, and most Toyotas are now sporting a lot of the same features you're going to get in much more expensive models, even compared to some of the luxury brands. Now, the ergonomics may not be as nice and they may not use as much leather and the finer materials, but people realize that a lot of the materials used in these vehicles wear well. All this plastic everywhere. Well, it's not pretty, it's not fancy, it wears well. It's cheap, it's effective. As long as all of the amenities are here, the vehicle's reliable, people tend to gravitate to these. You know, a leather interior needs maintenance. Nice plush carpets in some of these luxury vehicles needs maintenance, more regular cleaning. Toyota makes parts and pieces and interior components that are harder wearing. These cars are made to last. Sure, they may not have all the beautiful ergonomics. People who know Toyota just realize that I don't care about all the extras. I just want a vehicle that's going to go 350,000 miles, and I can save a lot of money by just driving something that's cheap like this rather than getting something luxurious. So Toyotas have their loyal following because even though the interior finishing may not be pretty, it has all of the basic amenities you could ever possibly want. And before we get into the main reason why used Toyotas will likely never be cheap again, further to the idea of maintenance and repairs, a lot of people realize that Toyotas are fairly simple to work on. And you don't have to have that complex diagnostic equipment. Most people, like Joe's backyard mechanic shop, is able to get into these vehicles and fix them. I mean, you've got easy access for filters and battery changes, you know, fusings well laid out. You have lots of components that are very easy to access. All of the items and parts and pieces, including even a serpentine belt, is quite easy to access. Everything is quite accessible and a very easy car to maintain. Whether you got to do spark plugs under there, just pop the cover, doesn't matter. Everything is fairly simple, and drivetrains like this are part of that. It's a simple 2.5 liter naturally aspirated. That's right, no turbos. That's another reason. But people can fix these, and a lot of people are okay in fixing these outside, of course, of warranty, and they can do it themselves. Get into a lot of these other modern day vehicles and they just become too complex, and yet Toyota sticks with these very simple engines, and they've kept those standards for many, many years. So you could buy a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder today, but you could also buy one maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and it really hasn't changed all that much. You might have something a wee bit more performance, but they really haven't fundamentally changed a ton. Another reason why prices are holding strong on older used Toyotas is their simplicity and the fact that they haven't changed a lot. They really haven't innovated a ton. Now, some people would argue that and say, well, they've got hybrid systems, they got ECVTs, and they've got enough innovation. Well, sure, they've got that, but they've kept a lot of their standards very, very similar. Obviously, keeping engines around for many years, I already spoke of. Innovation or lack thereof is actually some of the things and the reasons why people gravitate to these and drives the prices up, because they're easy to own. And you know what? If you've had an issue with a particular engine, that's carried through for years. And there's enough history, there's stories on the forums, and people recognize that they have a real track record of issues with a particular car, drivetrain. It's not that they're changing every 2 or 3 years. Toyota sort of built what they have and they've stuck with it for years, and people trust that. So it's easy to own, it's very predictable, and that's the key. If you're liking the video so far, you're gonna love the rest of the channel. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget the notifications bell so you know when the next amazing videos come. But hear me out. One of the biggest reasons now we're starting, and we're seeing it now, it begins right here, right now, is some of the biggest changes that Toyota's incorporated in the last couple of years. We just spoke of this lack of innovation, lack of change, predictability, you know, cheap parts and cheap costs. But some of that's all changing now. And see, this is what's going on. Now, while we have a very basic engine, and that's a big reason why we bought this engine and this year, was because it's been around a long time. We knew exactly everything about it, and we were willing to take a gamble on this one. We knew also right behind this was going to be a hybrid. We also knew at the same time the Tundras were swapping out and they were having problems with their new 3.4s. We were starting to hear a little bit of inkling of that. And also there's other issues with the 2.4 liter now in the Tacoma, not so much the engine itself, but that new 8-speed automatic transmission. A new transmission having issues. That new 3.4 eating bearings. Metal particulate, some were arguing initially had to do with maybe detonation problems, poor fueling. Many others are saying quality control, design. Many others are saying it was just metal particulate. Whatever it is, this problem has been lingering for now a few years. And if you read the forums, you're finding Toyota's having a real struggle with these 3.4s in both the Tundra as well as the Lexus LX600, which shares the same engine. Some argue that, well, it's the same engine you're seeing in the GX550. They're not having issues there, and they're not having issues in some of their other models that utilize that engine. Time will tell if they get to sort it out, and if I have faith in Toyota, they likely will. But the key is there's been a lot of change. You know, they've swapped out, gotten rid of that tried and true 5.7 liter V8 engine. It was naturally aspirated in the Tundra before. They replaced it with this new 3.4 and they're having problems. Okay, same thing with this 8-speed auto. Before that, they had the Tacoma, had a naturally aspirated, wonderful, gloriously reliable 3.5 liter V6, and as well, you know, a basic automatic or a manual gearbox. Things were simple. They weren't the most efficient, but they were reliable and people knew what they had. And then the new models come out. Now the new 4Runner's here too. The new 4Runner, the previous generation was an absolute workhorse. 270 horsepower, naturally aspirated V6. Everybody loved it. They were scooping those up while the end of the production run hit. Now all of a sudden they've replaced all the 4Runners. Even though they're still made in Japan, they now feature that 2.4 with that 8-speed automatic transmission. So all bets are off on reliability. Where is this going to leave future buyers? Well, right now, what it leaves is a lot of buyers in an insecure position. They see these 3.4s, they see these 8-speed autos, they're seeing some of these other issues creep in here, and it's really questioning the durability and reliability of the current generation. They're also now putting in some turbocharging, and there's some other issues with these turbos and direct injection, some technology that we saw only in cars like Mercedes, Audi, BMW, and those brands were heavily criticized for some reliability because of those levels of technology, and now Toyota is starting to incorporate that in some of their models. So where does that leave the rest of the buyers? Backdating. A lot of buyers now are saying, you know what, I don't really want that new 3.4. I don't want that new Tacoma. I'm going to go 2 or 3 years older. I don't want that 4Runner. I'm going to go backdate. And while they're hard to find on the used lots, they are out there. But this is what's starting to happen now, where people start to make that decision. I don't want that new one anymore. But the Toyota loyalists know how good the brand was up to and including around 2021, 22 is when things start to really snowball, especially with that 3.4 in the Tundra, that the decisions now have been made by a lot of people saying, you know what, maybe I'll buy a 1 or 2 year old, the previous generation, 30,000, 20,000, 40,000 miles on it. And they know they'll get 350, 400,000 miles out of the old engine. Now, are the new engines capable of that? Time will tell. We don't know. See, that's the thing. It's a bit of a gamble, and all bets are off. So people now are making a decision to go forward and buy some of these older drivetrains, these older models. What does that mean? Prices continue to rise. We heard during the chip shortage that people were paying a lot more for these used cars. In some cases, people were paying more for a slightly used Tacoma that was maybe a year old than they were brand new at the time. It just meant that people didn't have to wait, so they were willing to overpay for a slightly used Toyota. But here we are again. Those naturally aspirated, highly sought after vehicles in the Tacomas, in the 4Runners, even the Camrys that were naturally aspirated, even some of them without the hybrid. Some people just want a simple 4-cylinder NA V6, a vehicle that they can just start up and run and do most of the maintenance themselves. And once a warranty runs out, it doesn't matter. They're willing to take on some of the repairs themselves. So that's a big reason why a lot of these vehicles continue to hold a strong value, and I don't think we'll ever see a cheap used Toyota on the market again. But I'd like to challenge you. Please drop in the comment section below if you happen to come across any smoking deals that didn't just look like a deal, but you actually saw a deal, purchased it, or know somebody who purchased and got a phenomenal deal. Because right now, used Toyotas are extremely hard to find in good shape, undamaged, and of course with decent mileage. Otherwise, the only ones that I've been finding on the used market are smashed, bashed, worn out, clapped out, and realistically not the kind you want. That's why, in fact, we looked at some older used Camrys. We said, the heck with that. They just weren't worth it. You know, a car that was 3 or 4 years old, had 140,000, 120,000 kilometers on it. And we said, you know what, for about $3,000 or $4,000, $5,000 more, we'll get a brand new one. We got warranty. It's perfect. No one's been farting in the seats, and there's no damage, because every car that we called about had some kind of story. Well, it had a little accident, but, well, it had a hit there, but, there's a little mark on the Carfax, but. There was always a lot of stories, and we got tired of hearing stories. We just wanted a car that was ready to go, and quite honestly, it was becoming very, very hard to find. So starting today, starting actually a couple of years ago, it's beginning right now. Finding cheap used Toyotas, almost an impossibility. And with all of that said, everybody, right there, our Toyota dealer experience with the Toyota right here, our Camry 2022. It was quite the story. You're going to want to check it out. Hope to see each and every one in the next one, everybody. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.